I am Jim Pavley. I'm the Executive Director at the Treatment Advocacy Center. It's my privilege to moderate this panel this morning on the topic of Anosognosia. If anyone wants practice in pronouncing it, we'll provide that after the session. Anosognosia. We could get a chant going. The ground rules are going to be, it's going to be kind of a panel discussion rather than individuals stepping up to the podium. We're going to keep it conversational. We're going to start out understanding what anosognosia is. We're going to talk about personal experience with anosognosia, and then we're going to graduate our discussion to approaches to coping with anosognosia. We've got a very enlightened and distinguished panel here this morning, most of whom are known to you in various ways already, I think, but it bears introduction. On my immediate left is Dr. Javier Amador, who's known to many of you already. He is, in fact, the author of several books, including the most recent third printing edition of I Am Not Sick. He's got it right there. And he's just literally hot off the press. And Javier is a professor at Columbia University. He has appeared frequently in many forums. He has worked in a variety of very interesting consulting positions as well, forensic cases involving the Unabomber, those of you who remember those days, and then Abu Ghraib prison and the Zacarias Moussaoui trial. So he's a person that covers a lot of ground in his profession. On Javier's left is John Stanley. John is known to many here, and he has been with the Treatment Advocacy Center in many capacities, including as the Assistant Executive Director, as an advocate over a 10-year period, and as a current board member at the Treatment Advocacy Center. And then on John's left is someone who, boy, she's been active already so often here at the NAMI conference, Delaney Rustin. Doctor, filmmaker, daughter. And so we're going to get more chairs, I hope, and there'll be room here. If there's an empty seat, raise your hand, and the folks can come sit next to you. Or we can have a full house. All right. Javier, what is anosognosia?
Well, anosognosia was first coined around 1919 by a French neurologist who's actually from Hungary, but he was working in France. And he noticed people with neurological insults to the brain who were completely unaware of the deficits caused by the insult. So, for example, the classic description of somebody who's paralyzed on one side of their body and was completely unaware of it. I worked in a neurology service back in 1987, and for a year had the this opportunity isn't perhaps the best word to use, but the chance to see people with this deficit, with this disorder, and it was really shocking to me. How could you not know that you're paralyzed and literally try to get out of bed and for a week at a time? And at that time, it sparked my interest in whether or not this was something that we were also seeing in people with schizophrenia and bipolar disorder. And back then, there were about 12 research articles on the problem of poor insight. Today, there are well over 250 articles. Many of them have looked at this question: is what we're seeing in schizophrenia and anosognosia? Is it a lack of awareness? And there's scientific consensus now. Some people will debate this with me still, but I can answer that if there is any debate about it during this panel. That's not just me who says this. There's a great deal of data, well replicated. Executive dysfunction, frontal lobe dysfunction in the brain can cause, typically causes anosognosia, unawareness of having a mental illness, of having symptoms of mental illness, of having the need for treatment. or having any benefit from treatment? Long answer, sorry.
No, please. I thought I was just going to get away with asking you one question, but you're gracious to answer my question specifically. How many folks with severe mental illness, what percentage present with anosognosia, roughly?
I typically say 50%. If you look at the DSM-4 TR, that text was all peer-reviewed, meaning it's like a scientific journal. And I was co-chair with Michael Flaum when we revised the text back in 1999, so this is now 11 years ago. It was published in 2000. And back then, the group of experts that we impaneled, and then the APA committee above us, who looked at our work, read articles, and they said that a majority of people with schizophrenia have this problem. I still think it's around 50%, so that's one little debate, but it's a 10% difference. We're talking about half of all people with schizophrenia. We find the same rate in bipolar disorder. And this is not a problem that lasts for a week or a month. What the research shows is that it's long-standing. It lasts for years.
Can it come and go?
Like any symptom of a mental illness. And again, if you look at the DSM, and I keep going back to that, because it really reflects an effort by the work group 11 years ago to determine what's the scientific consensus. What do we know from the research? Not just my opinion, not just Nancy Andreassen's opinion. She had written the previous DSM section. It was brilliant. It was beautifully written. Much of it was accurate, but it was one person's opinion. So what we say in the DSM, what the consensus is that this is a symptom of the illness. Getting to your question. Any symptom waxes and wanes, right? My brother had schizophrenia. He hallucinated. Sometimes the hallucinations were horrific. They were harassing him. It was all day long. Other times he'd go all day with maybe hearing one or two voices. So you do see with anosognosia, sometimes it's worse, sometimes it's better. When it's better, what do you see? You see somebody who says, you know, I think I have a problem. And I can tell you, both as a clinician and as a brother of somebody with schizophrenia, I would get very excited and happy. Because early on, years ago, because I'm thinking, you know, we've broken through the denial. This is not denial. It's a symptom. And then the next day, it's back. And that was very confusing. It's still, I think, a very confusing thing for many of us, clinicians and family members.
Is it difficult to distinguish between lack of insight and outright denial?
I don't think so. I think the easiest way to distinguish the two is you're looking for a syndrome. It's just like we make a diagnosis of any mental disorder. We're looking for a syndrome that lasts over a long period of time. So we see a very severe unawareness. Somebody's been hospitalized, or they've seen a doctor, they've received a diagnosis. Well, I don't know if that person walks out of the hospital and says, I'm not sick, if it's denial yet or anosognosia. But if they've had repeated hospitalizations, if they've had repeated diagnoses, if treatment has had an impact on them, and this goes on for months and years, and it's severe and long-lasting, we're looking at anosognosia. We're looking at a deficit in brain function, not a coping strategy.